Log on to blackstoneproducts.com to get yours today. Blackstone. Better.
Success looks different for everyone, which means the path to success also looks different. For 75 years, University of Maryland Global Campus has helped adults succeed. You're not waiting to win. You're ready to succeed again at umgc.edu.
I love shopping The RealReal. It's Gucci,
Louis Vuitton,
Prada,
Hermes, Dior,
Rolex,
Burberry, Saint Laurent.
It's luxury brands up to 90% off retail.
It's 10,000 new arrivals every single day, and they've all been authenticated.
It's keeping it sustainable.
It's finding something one of a kind.
It's whatever you want it to be.
thousands of new arrivals daily, up to 90% off retail.
The RealReal, where luxury's yours to define.
Shop now and get 20% off.
CNN and streaming on Max. This is CNN Breaking News.
Hello and welcome to all of you watching us here in the United States, Canada, and all around the world. I'm Kim Brunhuber. I want to get to our breaking news this hour out of Russia. Russian President Vladimir Putin is issuing a blunt warning to Wagner mercenaries following their military pushback in southwestern Russia. In his address to the nation about 2 hours ago, he said the mercenaries backstabbed the country with what he called an armed rebellion. He made it clear their move will be punished, and he said Russia is facing what he described as an existential battle. Here he is.
I address the citizens of Russia and the members of the armed forces, law enforcement, and special services, and those who are now fighting in their combat positions to repel enemy attacks. They are doing so heroically, knowing that I spoke to the commanders in all directions again tonight. I also appeal to those who have been led by deceit or threats into this criminal adventure and pushed into the path of the severe crime of armed insurrection. Russia today is fighting an uphill battle for its future against the aggression of the Nazis and their masters. Virtually the entire military, economic, information machine of the West is directed against us. We are fighting for the life and security of our people, for our sovereignty and independence, for the right to be and remain Russia as a state with 1,000 years of history.
Earlier, Wagner's leader said his mercenaries took control of military facilities in the cities of Voronezh and Rostov-on-Don. Evgeny Prigozhin also threatened to move on to Moscow if top military leaders don't meet with him. Britain's defense ministry is calling that the most significant challenge to the Russian state in recent times. Now, in response, Russia is announcing the creation of an anti-terrorist operation regime in Moscow. Officials are also advising drivers to avoid a major highway in southern Russia, which is being used by Wagner's convoys. Well, this unprecedented situation has been unfolding rapidly over the past several hours, and CNN correspondents are covering all the angles. Nick Robertson is in London, and Ben Wiedemann is standing by in Zaporizhia, Ukraine. Well, let's begin with the latest from Ivan Watson in Hong Kong. So, Ivan, first, take us through Putin's strongly worded reaction to this crisis.
Right. Well, there had been some voices coming out of Moscow, Kremlin supporters, who were trying to downplay what was happening here. But Vladimir Putin made it very clear that this armed uprising, this mutiny by Yevgeny Prigozhin and his Wagner mercenaries, he invoked history. He said this was like 1917. That's when a rebellion erupted and overthrew the Tsarist government during World War I and led to a fratricidal civil war. He definitely invoked this, and he vowed to punish the people behind this mutiny. Take a listen to what else he said.
I repeat, any internal turmoil is a mortal threat to our statehood, to us as a nation. This is a blow to Russia, to our people. So our actions to defend the fatherland against such a threat will be severe. All those who deliberately chose the path of treachery, who prepared an armed mutiny, who chose the path of blackmail and terrorist methods, will face inevitable punishment.
Putin went on to say that they were adopting counterterrorism measures in the capital, Moscow, and in the Moscow region, and in some other regions. So we think that is going to be increased scrutiny, perhaps checkpoints on roads, measures like that, more security forces out and about. He conceded that the situation in the southern Rostov region was complicated, that the civilian and military command there had been blockaded, but he said that this would change. The question is, what measures are going to be taken? Because Yevgeny Prigozhin, by his own statements, is all in. He has said he claims some 25,000 fighters are ready to die for their cause. He began this basically invading Russia from Ukraine, where his forces have been fighting for months now, invading that southern province of Rostov, apparently without a shot, taking over control of Russia's southern military command. Take a listen to what he said before Vladimir Putin.
We are at headquarters at 7:30 a.m. Military facilities in Rostov, including the airfield, are under our control. Planes that leave for combat work leave as usual. No problems. Medical flights are leaving as usual. All we did was to take control so that the attack aviation would not strike us, but strike in the Ukrainian direction.
Prigozhin had himself filmed alongside some very senior Russian military commanders. One man we believe is the deputy defense minister. They looked almost like hostages surrounded by Prigozhin and his armed men. He was demanding that the chief of general staff, Valery Gerasimov, be delivered to him, as well as the defense minister, Sergei Shoigu. And he said until that happens, he would blockade Rostov and also move on Moscow. He had claimed to take over an airbase. Wagner has since claimed to have taken over some military facilities in the central Russian region of Voronezh. We cannot independently confirm that. We do know that the governor in that province has ordered people to stay away from the highway leading south from Rostov towards Moscow. There have been reports, unconfirmed, of clashes taking place around there. This is a very tense and fragile moment because initially Prigozhin was basically declaring war on senior Russian military commanders, accusing them of corruption and bad management of the war in Ukraine. Now Putin has stepped it up and declared war effectively on Prigozhin himself. So it will be a question. Could we see a confrontation between Wagner mercenaries and Russian security forces? Wagner mercenaries have been in the trenches for months fighting the Ukrainian military. These are seasoned, battle-hardened warriors with heavy weaponry. I cannot even imagine what would happen if such a conflict were to erupt.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Thanks so much, Ivan Watson in Hong Kong. I appreciate that. I want to bring in CNN international diplomatic editor Nick Robertson, who joins us now from London. So, Nick, the world, of course, is watching what's going on in Russia keenly. What's been the international reaction?
Well, NATO is watching the situation. The French President Emmanuel Macron is watching the situation, and the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz is watching the situation. The Prime Minister in Poland has met with his defense minister and spoken with allies. Everyone within proximity of Russia to the west of Russia is watching very closely. There is huge concern. This situation, as we've heard from British officials, is without recent historic precedent. So the dynamic here cannot be predicted. What is unfolding can become, as Ivan was saying, a direct confrontation on the streets with a very bloody and difficult outcome. What becomes clear is that if Putin doesn't wrest control of the situation quickly, he is going to look weak. We were speaking in the last hour about one of Putin's biggest military backers and supporters, Ramzan Kadyrov, the Chechen leader. What was his position going to be? Well, he appears to have made that clear now, and he appears to be saying, and of course the translation of what he said has to be thoroughly scrutinized, but he appears to be calling Prigozhin's actions treachery. So it seems that Putin has in his corner the very strong and firm backing of Kadyrov, which is important. But the question becomes for Putin and obviously all those nations watching the situation in Russia, how many of the military are going to side with Prigozhin? Prigozhin is very good about creating a lot of noise and putting out strong messaging. He has recruited over recent months a deputy defense minister. Russia's deputy defense minister lost his job inside the defense ministry and became a very senior official within for Wagner. Prigozhin has tended to engender, it appears, close support and loyalty from fighters who are close to him. So the question would be, how writ large is that? But to Prigozhin's point, that this war has not been fought well by the military, that Sergei Shoigu, the defense minister, Valery Gerasimov, the army chief of staff, have not prosecuted the war well. It's caused the high and unnecessary loss of life of Russian fighters. This is what Prigozhin has been saying. That was not addressed by President Putin. So I think there will be a lot of people in Russia who will be looking at this and saying how Putin handles that phase. He's called this treason, what Prigozhin is doing, his enabling through counterterrorism legislation, the crackdown on anyone siding with Prigozhin. But the actual accusation that this is a war that's being fought badly and might not, and perhaps should be ended, which is a very dangerous proposition for President Putin, that has not been answered by Putin today. So there's a military situation on the ground, but the dynamics behind what happens next, this is what's going to be so closely watched by all these countries, with a vested interest in Russia's stability.
Yeah, Nick, I mean, on that, one could argue that exposing the central lie of the war, Putin's rationale for the so-called special operation, is almost as dangerous to Putin as any military threat from Prigozhin. What effect do you think that will have on Putin's grip and on Russians themselves, the more than 200,000 who've lost loved ones?
The key for Putin all along is maintaining the narrative, the strength of narrative, controlling the narrative. He's been very slow to deal with Prigozhin, but the narrative is still in Putin's court on this. Prigozhin has been very effective on social media, and we're witnessing the abilities of Prigozhin to get his message out. However, as long as the sort of state media institutions are effectively behind Putin, which they are at the moment, then Putin's messaging wins out. And I think if as long as the state organs of information stay behind Putin, then this is an indication that Putin still remains in control and power. But how does he stand side by side with Sergei Shoigu, the defense minister? For a long time, Putin has been allowing Prigozhin to speak out aggressively against Shoigu, against Gerasimov, these strong men of Russia's military, if you will. Okay, they've been put there by Putin, but Putin's been allowing them to be, to be criticized heavily. It's only when Prigozhin has stepped over the line by questioning the war and putting his troops on the streets that the situation has risen to this level. How are those defense chiefs going to respond to Putin when Prigozhin is out of the picture? So, Putin's own power, his ability to wield power, his ability to have influence over the war in Ukraine, those things would be called into question. If we go back and remember the Kherson offensive by the Ukrainians, the fall of last year, Russia retreated out of there. Why? At the time we understood the reason why they retreated was because the military got control of the tactics on the ground from Putin. And said it didn't make military sense to stay and keep forces over the river, over the Dnipro River, pull them all back. So if the military have a stronger say in how the war plays out, this will affect Putin, because if Putin doesn't achieve his aims in Ukraine, then his term in leadership would seem to be over very quickly.
All right, fascinating analysis. Nick Robertson in London. Thank you so much. All right, so for more now on how those developments could affect Ukraine, we're joined by Ben Wiedemann in Zaporizhia. So, Ben, one could imagine Ukrainians would be celebrating the chaos unfolding in Russia.
It may still be too early, Kim, to celebrate. Certainly they are transfixed by what they are seeing going on in Russia. We've heard from Mikhailo Podolak, who's an advisor to the Ukrainian presidency, saying that the Ukrainian counteroffensive has destabilized the Russian elites, exacerbating internal divisions caused by Russian defeats on the battlefield. And certainly what we've seen is that since Russia launched its invasion of Ukraine, its full-scale invasion back in February of last year, the military performance by the Russians has been largely a failure. And therefore what we're seeing is, for instance, with Prigozhin's mercenaries now in control of Rostov, that the entire military situation is now up in the air. Keep in mind that Rostov is the headquarters of the Russian Southern Military District. It's a strategic command center for Russian forces in southern Ukraine. With Prigozhin in control, it's not at all clear who controls Russian forces in southern Ukraine and how they're going to respond if the Ukrainians launch the bulk of their forces against Russian lines. Now, I can tell you, Kim, yesterday we were in an area south of here where we saw a huge number of troops, of Western equipment, of logistical support primed to launch a major counteroffensive. What we've seen until now is fairly small advances by Ukrainian forces. They've taken just 8 really small villages. Villages is perhaps an overstatement of the kind of communities that are down there. But certainly the Ukrainians, this is a golden moment, perhaps a game changer for the Ukrainians as they are prepared to really carry this counteroffensive through. So the Ukrainians really are watching what's going on in the Kremlin, where it seems to be in a situation of chaos, to see whether this is really their golden moment to take full advantage of instability among the ranks of the Russian military and the political elite as well. Kim?
Ben, beyond the battlefield, is there any sense in Ukraine now that any optimism maybe that this might provide some incentive for Putin to come to the table for some real negotiations?
I think coming to the table for Putin is at this moment probably not his top priority. I think Putin's top priority now is to try to reestablish his authority, since he's got on the one hand Prigozhin, who has led perhaps the most effective military force in the war here, pitted against the entire military establishment of the defense, of the Ministry of Defense. And therefore, really it's a question of, can he hold on to power long enough to perhaps somewhere down the line come to the table. But at the moment, I think his real preoccupation is just maintaining his throne, let alone pursuing any diplomatic or military initiatives when it comes to Ukraine. Kim?
Absolutely. All right, Ben Wiedemann in Zaporizhia. Thank you so much. Well, this all comes as fighting is still raging across Ukraine. Officials there say their air defense systems have destroyed more than 20 missiles fired overnight around Kyiv. At least 2 people were killed and 8 were wounded when debris hit a tall building during that attack. Another 3 people died on Friday following Russian shelling in the south. And in the east, Ukrainian forces say Russia's main focus is still on the Donetsk region, but they're claiming to have firmly repulsed several Russian fighters in the area. Another Ukrainian official says the main strike of Kyiv's counteroffensive hasn't started yet and that they still have several operations in store. All right, still ahead, the search for answers in the Titan submersible tragedy. What we're learning about what went wrong and when. Stay with us.
At Morgan Stanley, old school hard work meets bold new thinking. To help you see untapped possibilities and relentlessly work with you to make them real.
Here's your parachute. Packed it myself.
Certain it's okay?
Mm-hmm.
Are you for imprint certain?
Certainty matters, like the certainty of congratulating coworkers or saying thank you for being a customer with promotional products from 4imprint. Our expert team is dedicated to making your satisfaction a certainty.
Packed it myself.
Land the perfect products at 4imprint.com.
4imprint, for certain.
This right here is confidence in a bottle.
Not only does it change you on the outside, but something in the inside, knowing
that you're looking better.
It makes me feel so much more confident than I've ever felt in my life.
They are some of the hottest videos on social media. Those videos claiming to instantly get rid of bags under your eyes. Well, today we're going to see one for ourselves and let you be the judge. It's called Plexiderm, and lifestyle expert Annette Figueroa is here to tell us why she says this one is for real.
This one is for real, and I'm so excited. We even have a video, and you'll notice the model has bags underneath his eyes and some sagging, and all he uses is a small amount on a clean, dry face, and that's how easy it is.
All right, what's the active ingredient?
Okay, so it's silicates that are minerals found in shale rock, and what it does is it tightens and lifts the appearance of bags underneath your eyes in as little as 10 minutes, no prescriptions, and very little effort. Even watching the video, this is a real, it's a model, but it's a real guy with real bags underneath his eyes.
My real true opinion is wholly words I can't say on camera. This is absolutely unbelievable. I mean, I could feel it just lifting my skin. It was amazing. It feels good. Feels great. Looks even better.
And I did this to my father. We were at home, so we applied it to his under eye bags, and let me tell you, we were so excited. In under 10 minutes, they visibly disappeared from view, and now it is literally part of both of our daily routines. He calls me every single month saying, "Hey, Annette, I'm out of Plexiderm, please send me more." And not only does it work on the bags, it works on the appearance of crow's feet, fine lines, and wrinkles. The way you want to do it is you want to have a clean, dry face. You use a small amount because it's so powerful. You have high school reunions, you have events you want to go to, you want to look years younger, this is it.
This July 4th is the best time to try Plexiderm at our startup price of only $14.95. Your solution is at plexidermtrial.com or call the number on your screen.
Meet the portable blender we can barely keep in stock. BlendJet 2 gives you ice-crushing, big blender power on the go. So you can blend up a mouth-watering smoothie, protein shake, or latte wherever you are. Recharge quickly with any USB port. Best of all, it even cleans itself. Just blend water with a drop of soap. What are you waiting for? Order yours now from blendjet.com before they sell out again.
Internet without trackers, without malicious websites, without malware-ridden files. Zen. Your data more secure, your connection protected. Be more Cyber Zen. Get NordVPN. Enjoy cleaner, safer, and more private internet daily.
And welcome back. Returning to our top story this hour, Russia says it will carry out counter-terrorist operations in the regions of Moscow and Voronezh in response to what it called an armed revolt by mercenary chief Yevgeny Prigozhin. In an address to the nation, President Vladimir Putin condemned the Wagner leader and promised to punish those who, quote, deliberately went on a path of treason. Here he is.
We are fighting for the life and security of our people, for our sovereignty and independence, for the right to be and remain Russia as a state with 1,000 years of history.
Now, all this comes as Prigozhin says he's carrying out a, quote, march of justice against the Russian Defense Ministry for allegedly killing many of his mercenaries in a strike, a claim the ministry denies. Now, earlier, Prigozhin said his forces had seized several military facilities in southern Russia. Here he is.
We are at headquarters at 7:30 a.m. Military facilities in Rostov, including the airfield, are under our control. Planes that leave for combat work leave as usual. No problems. Medical flights are leaving as usual. All we did was to take control so that the attack aviation would not strike us, but strike in the Ukrainian direction.
The U.S. and Canada have each announced investigations into the tragic loss of the Titanic-bound submersible and all 5 people on board. Search teams have been scouring the ocean floor to map the debris field and establish a timeline of what went wrong. Now, this has all brought renewed scrutiny into the safety practices of the company behind the submersible. OceanGate's co-founder says people shouldn't rush to judgment. Jason Carroll has the latest on the efforts at the wreckage site.
These are some of the first images of the remotely operated vehicles which found portions of the Titan's hull and continue tonight on a new mission to search and map the debris site. The ROVs will continue searching for more evidence of the accident. The submersible lost contact with the ship on the surface 1 hour and 45 minutes into its descent on Sunday.
The other thing that I heard was that PH had contacted the surface ship and said there was a problem, we're dropping weights and surfacing immediately. Now, I can't verify that, but that to me meant something really happened very quickly.
OceanGate did not comment when asked about what Gallo had heard. Deep-sea experts questioned the lack of testing of the vessel and the integrity of materials used to make the hull. A CNN review shows that while OceanGate publicly touted a commitment to safety measures, it rejected industry standards that would have imposed greater scrutiny on its operations and vessels.
Specially trained crew members safely diving to the Titanic wreckage site.
In this promotional video published last year, the company touted an unforgettable but safe voyage. That video also features Paul-Henri Nargeolet, one of the passengers on board Titan.
The sub for me, it's very well done because it's simple. Generally, they have a lot of equipment and a lot of switch. And on this one, you don't have because you work with a screen and with a keyboard, and it's very easy to do that.
CNN also learned 2 former OceanGate employees separately voiced safety concerns about the design of the Titan. OceanGate has not responded to CNN about those claims. And in 2019, Lloyd's Register, a marine certification company, declined a request from OceanGate to certify the Titan. The company has not said why. OceanGate's co-founder, who left the company in 2013, cautioned against rushing to judgment.
There are teams on site that are still going to be collecting data for the next few days, weeks, maybe months, and it's going to be a long time before we know exactly what happened down there.
Both the NTSB and the Canadian Transportation Safety Board say they have launched investigations into what happened. Also, the U.S. Coast Guard has declared the loss of the Titan to be a major marine casualty. Jason Carroll, CNN, Boston.
All right, still ahead, much more on the crisis in Russia. An expert on defensive strategy weighs in on Yevgeny Prigozhin's actions and the government's response. Plus, the turmoil in Russia is exposing the cracks in Putin's grip on power. Look at what's fueling the crisis. That's next. Stay with us.
CVS and Walgreens don't want you to know about this little-known loophole to get generic Viagra for just 87 cents. They sell each tablet for $30 to $40. Let me show you. This is from CVS. Look. 9 tablets, 100 milligrams sildenafil, aka generic Viagra, for $406. That's $45 a tablet. This is from Walgreens, $417 for 9 tablets of 100 milligrams sildenafil, or $46 per tablet. You can now get the exact same ED meds delivered for just 87 cents per tablet. The program is called Friday Plans. They get you prescribed generic Viagra online and deliver it right to your door in discreet packaging for as little as 87 cents per tablet. All doses are priced the same, so you don't pay more if you need a stronger dose. The prescription is free, and the shipping is free too. Get generic Viagra from Friday Plans for as little as 87 cents by texting SOAR to 69069. Once you text, they will send you a link to get you started. All you got to do is answer a few questions on their website. One of their doctors will review your answers and prescribe you online, if appropriate. After that, Friday Plans delivers your generic Viagra in a plain white package like this in 2 to 3 days. Once you open it, you find this inside. So much better than a pill bottle. Each tablet comes individually wrapped, so you can tear one off and put it in your wallet. Right now, Friday Plans is offering $10 off your first package, which means you can get 9 tablets for just $15, including taxes and fees. The prescription is free, and the shipping is free as well. Text SOAR to 69.
This is CNN.
Welcome back to all of you watching us here in the United States, Canada, and all around the world. I'm Kim Brunhuber. This is CNN Newsroom. I want to bring you more on our top story this hour. Chechen leader Ramzan Kadyrov has condemned what he called a treacherous march by mercenary chief Yevgeny Prigozhin and pledged his support to the Russian president. In a speech to the nation, President Vladimir Putin accused the Wagner leader of an armed rebellion, and he promised to punish anyone who, quote, went on a path of treason.
This is a blow to Russia, to our people. So our actions to defend the fatherland against such a threat will be severe. All those who deliberately chose the path of treachery, who prepared an armed mutiny, who chose the path of blackmail and terrorist methods will face inevitable punishment and will answer both to the law and to our people. The necessary orders have been issued to the armed forces and other government agencies, and additional anti-terrorist measures are being introduced in Moscow and in the Moscow region and several other regions. Decisive action will also be taken to stabilize the situation in Rostov-on-Don. The situation remains complex as the work of the civilian and military administrative bodies has effectively been blocked.
All this comes after Prigozhin claimed to have seized several facilities from the Russian military. One of them is in the southern city of Rostov-on-Don, right next to Ukraine. The Wagner chief had vowed to retaliate against the Russian Defense Ministry, which he says killed many of his forces in a strike, something the Russians deny. All right, joining me now is Malcolm Davis, a senior analyst in defense strategy and capability at the Australian Strategic Policy Institute. Thank you so much for joining us here. So I just want to start with Prigozhin. I mean, he says he intends to roll on Moscow. I mean, what do you think his aims are here?
Well, clearly his initial aim was to essentially challenge and attack the Russian Ministry of Defense leadership. Sergei Shoigu and Valery Gerasimov in particular, to hold them to justice, as he put it. It's a march for justice is what he's calling this. But it now seems that his aims are expanding because President Putin's speech earlier this evening has basically challenged Prigozhin, branded him a criminal. And so Prigozhin has come back and said, well, we'll have a new president soon enough. So that suggests to me that his aims are expanding. He sees this as a direct challenge to the Putin regime. And that does suggest that he needs to actually march on Moscow to achieve that. And so the question in my mind is, how practical is that given the size of his forces? And does he have assistance along the way? In particular, does he have supporters in Moscow that could make a march on Moscow achievable?
So I want to ask you, I mean, he's called for Russian soldiers to join forces. Do you think that this will turn into something larger, an actual coup?
I think it could. It largely does depend on what level of support he does get within the Russian military, particularly within the rank and the file. In other words, the lower level soldiers, in the ranks, the non-commissioned officers, the junior officers. He's never going to really get that much support from the senior leadership, but certainly the grunts on the ground, shall we say, that have been in the thick of it in terms of fighting in Ukraine, I think potentially could side to his move to his side. In which case, the Prigozhin Wagner force could expand considerably in size and capability, and it might make it easier for them to move north from Rostov-on-Don to Voronezh and then ultimately to Moscow. So I think that is his plan, is to try and grow his force so that he has a greater chance of ultimately moving on Moscow.
But I mean, how realistic is that? He's still a long way from Moscow, and Putin has the entire power of the entire Russian military at his disposal.
Well, Rostov-on-Don is only a 15-hour drive to Moscow, which in the scheme of maneuver warfare is not a huge distance. He's already fighting, got forces fighting in Voronezh, and the next city along that road is Moscow. So it really is a case of how many forces that he can get, switch to his side, how quickly he can expand his force, how much support he gets within Moscow. It's quite likely that there would be elements within Moscow, within the Russian military, that would be assisting him. And so that could make it easier for him to get to Moscow. But then, of course, we are talking about the potential risk of major fighting occurring in the streets of Moscow between Prigozhin's forces on the one hand and those forces loyal to Putin on the other. So, and that, I think, is where we talk about the prospect of civil war. It gets to that point there where you've got fighting in Moscow. I think at that point we're at civil war.
Gosh, just a frightening prospect. I mean, you talked about support for Prigozhin. I mean, what role do you think the oligarchs and elites may be playing behind the scenes?
Okay, well, we're talking about the oligarchs, which are sort of the wealthy business elite, and also the Siloviki, which are the essentially the intelligence and security elite. They're watching what's happening with Ukraine. They're clearly seeing the writing on the wall that essentially Russia is not winning this war and could quite easily lose this war. And if anything, the Prigozhin uprising is making a Russian defeat more likely, because it could open up opportunities for the Ukrainians to exploit gaps in the Russian defenses there. So the Siloviki and the oligarchs will be thinking about how do they protect their interests? How do they protect their wealth, their position, their power? If they can't protect it through Putin, they would seek to have another leader come in that would replace Putin. I don't think it would be Prigozhin, but it could be someone from the shadows that could come in that would be loyal to the Siloviki and the oligarchs and protect their interests in return for being given access to the Kremlin and having the top job. And Putin, well, he would be finished. So I think that's where you have to look in terms of who is the puppet masters here, who is pulling the strings. It could be that Putin is facing his own demise, and so we're now in a desperate struggle between, on the one hand, Putin, who is seeking to hold on to power and hold on to his own personal well-being, and Prigozhin's forces that, shall we say, could have some sort of assistance from within elements of the Russian military if those elements feel that their future is better held if Prigozhin succeeds.
For Putin, then, clearly needing allies, the fact that the Chechen leader has declared his allegiance in this time of need, how important is that for Putin?
It's really early days yet. He's just declared it. We don't know how many forces that Kadyrov would bring to the table or where they would be deployed, but certainly the Chechens have a reputation for ruthless fighters, and so therefore I think that's a disturbing development. I mean, let's be clear, there's no potential follow-on leader after Putin, whether it's Prigozhin or someone else in the Siloviki or the oligarchs or someone that's potentially could come out of the Chechen area. There's none of them that really are, shall we say, friendly to the West. They're all hardline nationalists. So I'm not seeing any happy endings here in terms of a color revolution emerging in Moscow that ultimately leads to a new leadership that wants to end the war in Ukraine and restore relations with the West. That's not happening. So ultimately we could be facing a really uncertain future, whether Putin survives or not.
Yeah, frightening implications there. Really appreciate your analysis on this developing story. Malcolm Davis, thanks so much.
Thank you.
And we'll be right back.
Avoiding triggers but still get migraine attacks? Qulipta can help prevent migraine attacks. Qulipta gets right to work, keeps attacks away over time. Qulipta is a preventive treatment for episodic migraine. Most common side effects are nausea, constipation, and tiredness. Ask your doctor about Qulipta.
Introducing the limited edition Disney collection from BlendJet. 9 exciting designs your whole family will adore. BlendJet 2 is portable, which means you can blend up nutritious smoothies, protein shakes, or frozen treats just about anywhere. Recharge quickly via USB-C. It even cleans itself. Order yours now from blendjet.com and bring a little Disney into your life.
You got me.
Tag, you're it.
Imagine a world with no drama. With 4imprint, you don't have to chase down the perfect promotional products. Exclusive apparel, bags, drinkware, and more. 4imprint will help you capture the moment and guarantee to deliver your order on time and on budget. Take the drama out of ordering promotional products at 4imprint.com.
4imprint, for certain.
Meet Carrie and Sherry. They started an apparel company for women who ride. When business took off, they needed a loan. SmartBizLoans.com found them a bank which got them an SBA loan with a great rate.
Without SmartBiz, we probably wouldn't have gotten a loan.
Apply at SmartBizLoans.com/TV.
You've evolved. You've changed. So have we. That's why new Dove Body Wash now has 24-hour renewing micro moisture for continuous care. New Dove Body Wash. Change is beautiful.
Hey! Flowers, balloons, Larry David, what could be better?
Tired of wasting your money on products that just don't work? We don't blame you. That's why Nugenix Total T lets you try before you buy. Just text ROAR to 42424. To claim your complimentary sample. Why have millions of men already trusted Nugenix for a man-boosting increase in their testosterone levels? Well, it's a patented formula, so nothing else is like it. It contains testofen, a patented key ingredient shown to work in not one, not two, but 4 clinical studies. It's the #1 doctor-recommended brand, and it's #1 at GNC and Walmart. But don't take our word for it. Prove it to yourself. Try before you buy. If it works, keep using it. If not, keep the sample and tell all your friends we're full of it. You've got nothing to lose, but you could gain energy, muscle, drive, even more passion. Text ROAR to 42424. Do it now and we'll also send you a bottle of Nugenix Thermo X, our newest, most powerful fat burner ever, absolutely free. Text ROAR to 42424.
I'm Caitlin Polance at the federal court in Washington, and this is CNN.
I want to bring you updates on our breaking news out of Russia. The British Defense Ministry says Wagner's military pushback is the greatest challenge to the Russian state in recent history. The mercenaries claim they took control of military facilities in 2 cities in the southwest, and their leader, Evgeny Prigozhin, is threatening to continue on to Moscow if top military leaders don't meet with him. But in his address this morning, President Vladimir Putin called that an armed rebellion and said it would be punished. Security has been stepped up in Moscow, where officials are carrying out what they call anti-terrorism measures. A Russian intelligence official says Prigozhin's actions amount to a coup.
Only the president has the right to appoint the top leadership of the armed forces. And if you're trying to encroach on his authority, this is a coup d'etat. There is no need to do this now because there is no greater damage to the image of Russia and to its armed forces.
So just who is Evgeny Prigozhin and what do we know about the leader of the Wagner private military company? Well, to answer that, let's bring in CNN's Selma Abdelaziz in London. So, Selma, help us understand the players involved on the Wagner side here.
Yes, Yevgeny Prigozhin was once President Putin's secret weapon, and he is now very much the thorn in his side. He came from the same humble beginnings as President Putin in St. Petersburg. He knew him since the 1990s. He built an empire, a catering empire that led to that alias Putin chef, but it was really in the invasion of Crimea in 2014 when he began to rise to prominence as the head of the Wagner military group. He then used that group essentially as Putin's private army, carrying out his bidding in Africa, the Middle East. But all of that was done behind a curtain without Yevgeny Prigozhin claiming any credit at all. It was not until the invasion of Ukraine, Kim, when he really stepped into the limelight and did it as loudly and as antagonistically as he could, showing up the Russian military on the front lines in Ukraine time and time again, calling out Russia's military leadership, essentially starting a war of words with the defense minister of Russia, saying that he should be tried for failing his own people. And in these messages, and I know you're playing some of them right now, he's not just speaking to his own men, to his own mercenary group, he was talking to the Russian public at large. And that's why so many for months have asked the question, why has President Putin allowed this man not just to rise to a level of prominence, but to rise to a level of dissent, if you will, airing Russia's dirty laundry right on those front lines. We have an answer, if you will, now with President Putin's statement today, who has accused Yevgeny Prigozhin of treason, said he will be held accountable, as you mentioned. But is it too late to contain a man who now says he has 25,000 soldiers, 25,000 mercenaries armed and ready to defend him, who's taking control of a city in the south, part of the military command of the south in Russia? This is a huge and complicated challenge for President Putin, and it's playing out right in front of everyone's eyes.
Yeah, absolutely. Whole world watching. So, Salma, it might be hard to predict at this point, but what could be Prigozhin's fate here?
It is absolutely hard to predict. I mean, this is an unprecedented situation. President Putin himself invoked history dating back over 100 years when talking about this situation, likening it to a rebellion, a coup, an attempt to overthrow the authority of Russia. That means he absolutely must respond with force. But again, what does that force look like when you have Yevgeny Prigozhin holed up again in Rostov with his soldiers, with his men ready to defend him, he says? And how does President Putin now turn to the Russian military and those top military brass leaders that he allowed to be antagonized and publicly humiliated by Prigozhin for months without appearing weak, without essentially owing them in the coming days? What is most concerning, I think, is, of course, the possibility of this turning bloody. Yevgeny Prigozhin seems all in. He's already raided across the border, entered Russian territory, taken control of a city, and said he is willing to do anything to defend himself and his group. Is the Russian military willing to do the same? One can only assume so, given President Putin's very strong words. Does that mean Russians fighting Russians on Russian soil in the coming days? All of this, of course, pushes the Ukraine war in the background when we're speaking about President Putin simply trying to defend his throne.
Yeah, exactly right. Salma Abdelaziz in London, thanks so much. And we will be right back. Please stay with us.
When migraine strikes, you're faced with a choice. Ride it out with the trade-offs of treating, or push through the pain and symptoms. With Ubrelvy, there's another option. One dose works fast to eliminate migraine pain. Treat it anytime, anywhere, without worrying where you are or if it's too late. Do not take with strong CYP3A4 inhibitors. Allergic reactions to Ubrelvy can happen. Most common side effects were nausea and sleepiness. Migraine pain relief starts with you. Ask about Ubrelvy. Learn how AbbVie could help you save.
This is Poof, the most powerful pet odor eliminator in the world.
No harsh chemicals.
No harsh chemicals at all.
No fragrances.
None.
Seriously?
Oh. It's safe for people, pets, and the planet. What's this?
Oh.
That's pure ammonia. Just gotta poof it. Check this out.
Wow, I don't smell anything. Literally nothing.
That's because there's nothing to smell. Poof is a commercial-grade formula. A no-nonsense, no-fragrance odor eliminator. A formula used in the country's largest municipal waste companies to eliminate organic odors and make entire communities more livable. Yet, it meets the most stringent safety standards. Pet odor, poof it. Urine, poof. Feces, poof. Vomit, litter box smell, plus the odor on the pet. Wet dog, poof. Eye odor, poof. Ear odor, poof. Face odor, poof. Stinky skin folds, any organic odor, poof. Even skunk odor. Ugh. One spray and it goes away. Give it a smell.
Wow.
Generic sprays only cover up and reduce odor. I smell like poop and flowers now. Poof works instantly. It dismantles odor on a molecular level. It literally takes stink out of the equation. Powerful enough to eliminate skunk odor and the stink in artificial turf and garbage cans. Yet safe enough to use on pet toys, their beds, even on them. So why waste money on any product that doesn't totally eliminate the stink?
Call now and get a 32-ounce bottle of Poof for just $24.95 and get free shipping. And I guarantee you'll never use anything else again. Plus, get a free sample of Poof Laundry Odor Eliminator. Just one wash removes the toughest odors from your laundry and your washer.
Get Poof on Amazon, Poof.com, Chewy.com, and select Walmart stores. If it's not Poof, it stinks.
CVS and Walgreens don't want you to know about this little-known loophole to get generic Viagra for just 87 cents. This is from CVS. Look, 9 tablets, 100 milligrams sildenafil, aka generic Viagra, for $406. That's $45 a tablet. This is from Walgreens. $417 for 9 tablets of 100 milligrams sildenafil, or $46 per tablet. You can get the exact same tablets from Friday Plans for just 87 cents. Text PINK PINK to 69069 and get generic Viagra for just 87 cents. All you got to do is answer a few medical questions on their website. One of their doctors will prescribe you online if appropriate. Right now, Friday Plans is offering $10 off your first package, so you can get 9 tablets for just $15, including taxes and fees. The prescription is free, and the shipping is free as well. Text PINK PINK to 69069.
Closed captioning is brought to you by Audiobook Network. Authors tell your story. Produce an audiobook with us.
Want to earn more profits and find a new audience for your published book? Produce an audiobook. We handle narration, production, and digital distribution.
800-753-8559.
All right, a quick update on our breaking story out of Russia, where the governor of the southern region of Voronezh says the Russian military is carrying out necessary combat operations in the region. It comes as videos geolocated to a highway there show Wagner Group fighters and vehicles. Earlier, Putin addressed the nation after a military pushback by Wagner mercenaries and said they would be punished. He also suggested that the very existence of Russia is on the line. Here he is.
We are fighting for the life and security of our people, for our sovereignty and independence, for the right to be and remain Russia as a state with 1,000 years of history.
Wagner mercenaries claim they took control of military facilities in 2 cities in the southwest, but the governor of one region says Russia's military is carrying out anti-terrorism combat operations. Also, Wagner's leader, Evgeny Prigozhin, is threatening to continue on to Moscow if top military leaders don't meet with him. A major Chechen military leader is condemning Prigozhin, calling his actions a vile betrayal. Our Fred Plykin has more on the man at the center of the story.
He's long been a well-known mercenary leader around the world. Now, Yevgeny Prigozhin is a wanted man in Russia as well. His often merciless group of fighters is now pitted against the Russian military leadership, and Prigozhin is suddenly Moscow's public enemy number 1. Vladimir Putin calling for Prigozhin's group to lay down their arms.
All those who deliberately chose the path of treachery, who prepared an armed mutiny, who chose the path of blackmail and terrorist methods will face inevitable punishment and will answer both to the law and to our people.
He may now be something of a nemesis to Vladimir Putin, but it was his decades-long relationship with the Russian president that allowed Prigozhin to establish his own militia, the Wagner Group. Wagner served as a private army, doing controversial jobs that often not even Russia's military could do. Prigozhin, a former prisoner himself and self-styled hard man from St. Petersburg, used Wagner to operate around the world. CNN has tracked Wagner mercenaries to the Central African Republic, Sudan, Libya, Mozambique, Ukraine, and to Syria. Along the way, Prigozhin enriched himself. Rights groups have accused Wagner of horrific violence, like this of Wagner fighters allegedly smashing the feet and hands of a Syrian prisoner with a sledgehammer in 2017. The man reportedly died after his ordeal. The images are incredibly disturbing, like so many others attributed to his group. For many years, Prigozhin denied the existence of Wagner, its work best done in secret. A master of myth-making, it was Prigozhin and Wagner who set up the notorious Russian troll farm used to spread disinformation around the 2016 U.S. presidential election. But when his fighters took to the battlefield in eastern Ukraine and began winning battles, Prigozhin seemed to want the spotlight.
The Bakhmut operation began on October 8, 2022, in order to give the battered Russian army an opportunity to recover. Our guys stormed this city for 224 days. There were only Wagner private forces here.
His tactics included flinging poorly armed and poorly trained troops into the so-called meat grinder of war in Ukraine's east, suffering a shocking number of casualties in an attempt to overwhelm defenses. Prigozhin rubbed his victories in the face of Russia's flailing Defense Department, venting his fury at the haphazardness and ill planning of Russia's illegal invasion, and chastising the Russian top brass, mocking Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu.
You think you are the masters of this life? You think you can dispose of their lives? You think because you have warehouses full of ammunition that you have that right?
Now, the Kremlin's secret weapon may be its biggest threat. For Plagin, CNN, Berlin.
Well, that wraps this hour of CNN Newsroom. I'm Kim Brunhuber. You can follow me on Twitter at Kim Brunhuber. CNN This Morning is next.
This right here is confidence in a bottle.
Not only does it change you on the outside, but something in the inside, knowing that you're looking better.
It makes me feel so much more confident than I've ever felt in my life.
They are some of the hottest videos on social media. Those videos claiming to instantly get rid of bags under your eyes. Well, today we're going to see one for ourselves and let you be the judge. It's called Plexiderm, and lifestyle expert Annette Figueroa is here to tell us why she says this one is for real.
This one is for real, and I'm so excited. We even have a video, and you'll notice the model has bags underneath his eyes and some sagging, and all he uses is a small amount on a clean, dry face, and that's how easy it is.
All right, what's the active ingredient?
Okay, so it's silicates that are minerals found in shale rock, and what it does is it tightens and lifts the appearance of bags underneath your eyes in as little as 10 minutes, no prescriptions, and very little effort. Even watching the video, this is a real, it's a model, but it's a real guy with real bags underneath his eyes.
My real true opinion is holy words I can't say on camera. This is absolutely unbelievable. I mean, I could feel it just lifting my skin. It was amazing. It feels good. Feels great. Looks even better.
And I did this to my father. We were at home, so we applied it to his under eye bags, and let me tell you, we were so excited. In under 10 minutes, they visibly disappeared from view, and now it is literally part of both of our daily routines. He calls me every single month saying, "Hey, Annette, I'm out of Plexiderm, please send me more." And not only does it work on the bags, it works on the appearance of crow's feet, fine lines, and wrinkles. The way you want to do it is you want to have a clean, dry face. You use a small amount because it's so powerful. You have high school reunions, you have events you want to go to, you want to look years younger, this is it.
This July 4th is the best time to try Plexiderm at our startup price of only $14.95. Your solution is at plexidermtrial.com or call the number
7 on CNN.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to CNN This Morning. It is Saturday, June 24th. I'm Amara Walker.
I'm Victor Blackwell. Thank you for spending part of your Saturday morning with us.
We're beginning with breaking news. The crisis in Russia. President Vladimir Putin is accusing the Wagner mercenary group of an armed rebellion, and he warns that those involved will be punished.
The head of the Wagner group, Yevgeny Prigozhin, says his forces have taken control of Russian military facilities in the region of Rostov-on-Don. He threatens to move on to Moscow if Russia's top general and defense minister don't meet him.
Again, we came here. We want to receive the Chief of General Staff and Shoigu. Until they aren't here. Until they aren't here, we will be located here, blockading the city of Rostov, and we'll go to Moscow.
President Putin calls the actions by Prigozhin a betrayal and a stab in the back to the Russian people, and he says those who follow him will pay the price.
All those who deliberately chose the path of treachery, who prepared an armed mutiny, who chose the path of blackmail and terrorist methods will face inevitable punishment and will answer both to the law and to our people.
We're following all of the developments on what's happening in Russia with our reporters and analysts around the world this morning. So let's start there with the latest on what's happening in Russia right now.
CNN Chief International Security Correspondent Nick Payton-Walsh is tracking the developments for us. What is happening right now?
We've never seen anything like this in Putin's Russia before. Quite unprecedented territory, a direct threat to his grip on power for 23 years. Now, at this stage, we are checking to see if the Wagner forces you heard about that are in Rostov, seen on the streets there, casually relaxed around key buildings. Remember, this is a military hub for the Russian war in Ukraine and forces across that southern region, to see if these forces are indeed trying to move, as they say they are, in the direction of Moscow. There are suggestions from some of their supporters that they may have got into the city of Voronezh, kind of halfway on the highway up towards Moscow. That is not confirmed and indeed denied by Kremlin-backed officials in that area. But at the same time, too, the governor of Voronezh has said that combat measures by the Russian military have indeed begun. That would be a suggestion that the Russian military are indeed taking on Wagner. Now, it's unclear the size of the Wagner force that has moved, but this all began on Friday with an extraordinary series of statements by their leader, Yevgeny Prigozhin, essentially taking issue with the entire cause of Russia's war in Ukraine, saying that essentially Russians had been deceived and there wasn't a threat from NATO. Russians were not being persecuted. That was suddenly, it seemed, responded to by claims of an airstrike against a Wagner camp, probably inside of Ukraine. That's been denied by the Russian Ministry of Defense, but it's put into place this extraordinary series of events of Wagner forces, it seems, being taken from Ukraine and marching on a Russian military hub, Rostov-on-Don, and now it seems heading further. And the important thing to note here is, while perhaps Yevgeny Prigozhin may have begun all of this as a bid to take on the top brass of Russia's military, the defense minister Sergei Shoigu and Gerasimov, the chief of staff, now running that operation. It's now clearly him against Vladimir Putin. He's been utterly clear in his most recent statement that he thinks the president is mistaken to suggest this is a betrayal, and Putin was very clear that those who are now behind this insurrection have chosen the path of blackmail and terrorist methods and will face inevitable punishment. A suggestion in that speech from Putin, if you want to lay your arms down, there might be some succor, but frankly, straight up here, he was saying, we're going to put this down. The question is, can he? And how long does this go on for? Every hour essentially calls into question Putin's control of Russia, and more importantly, possibly too, for the world, quite how the war in Ukraine will play out in the hours ahead.
Yeah, Nick, authoritarianism, or if this is now progressed to totalitarianism, does not allow for this type of confrontation, either rhetorically or militarily. So what potentially is next? Are we talking potential civil war? You say this is now Prigozhin v. Putin. Is this a coup attempt? How would you frame this?
Look, this has become Prigozhin versus Putin. There's no doubt about it after the speech we heard from Putin and the response from Prigozhin. I think it would have been naive, frankly, for Prigozhin to think he could do something like this and will essentially occur the wrath of the Kremlin head and have that taken out instead on the top brass of Russia's military. Where do we go from now? Well, it comes down to really how much of Russia's beleaguered military, their special forces decimated after this ghastly war in Ukraine, where the frankly mismanagement has been in evidence from the very first days. It was supposed to take 3 days. Now here we are 16 months in, and they're still labouring to try and and hold parts of territory. It depends what's left of the Russian military to defend Putin. Do the special forces of the FSB, Russia's security services, feel they want to turn their guns on Prigozhin and the men around him, Wagner fighters who've lost thousands of colleagues in the fight for Bakhmut, who've put themselves up as the storied heroes? They're brutal fighters, make no mistake about it, but the storied heroes of Russia's frontline activity. Are the Russian military willing to turn their guns upon them, or are we going to see Wagner, as it moves, amassing more strength from Russia's military as it heads towards Moscow? I can't believe, frankly, I'm even saying this. Unprecedented territory, and I think it goes to show when you get behind the curtain of exactly what's happening in Putin's Russia, about which we know so little. Finally, when sunlight shines upon it, it is an utterly startling picture of betrayal we're seeing here, and utter chaos, and a man at the top who's clearly not in control.
Yeah, an extraordinary turn of events and a big question as to what this means for Putin and the future of Russia. Nick Payton-Walsh, thank you very much. Let's go now to CNN senior international correspondent Frederick Pleiken. Fred, tell us more about Yevgeny Prigozhin, who rose to prominence as a close ally of Vladimir Putin for many, many years. He was one of his wealthy oligarchs and then turned into this very effective leader of a private military group, and now he's challenging Putin's grip on power.
Yeah, the leader of a whole empire, if you will, Amra. It really is a rise that is also unprecedented inside Russia, but certainly one that also speaks to how Vladimir Putin controls the country. We have to keep in mind that Yevgeny Prigozhin is still known to many people as being Putin's caterer or Putin's chef, because he ran a catering service that apparently also catered to Vladimir Putin as well, and then became closer and closer to the Russian president and started building this big empire, which of course also includes propaganda institutions, the Internet Research Agency, of course, which is known for having meddled, the U.S. says, in the 2016 election. Yevgeny Prigozhin is one of the individuals who was sanctioned by the U.S. for meddling in the 2016 election. But he then built that empire, including the Wagner private military company. He is, of course, the head of the Wagner private military company. And it's one of those things where we've seen that company rise meteorically, really, over the past couple of years. I was in Syria in, I think, 2014 or 2015 when we first saw Wagner appear on the scene there. They were essentially doing base protection, some of the things that private military companies do, but then continuously got involved in the fight as well. He then branched out into the oil business for the oil fields that the Assad regime had taken back, essentially taking control of those, getting a cut of that as well, and then moved operations also into Africa and built an empire there, training African forces, for instance, with his private military company, but then also, of course, getting into the gold and diamond trade as well, running mines and the like. So he certainly became a force globally and someone whose global reach continued. And then if we look at Ukraine, that is where I would say this turned from being a private military company that does security and maybe some training into what we see now, which is a full-fledged army. In fact, Yevgeny Prigozhin himself calls Wagner the most powerful army in Russia. He calls it one of the most powerful armies in the world, quite frankly. And a lot of what Nick was talking about before certainly was a catalyst for that, which is the Battle of Bakhmut, which was obviously extremely brutal, where he started using these tactics of taking prisoners from Russian prisons and then bringing them to the front lines to charge at Russian positions. I was in Bakhmut for when some of that was going on, and we had Ukrainians who were telling us that there were just dozens and dozens of Wagner mercenaries who kept charging their positions all the time, and it was very difficult for them to hold the line. However, he claims that he had success in Bakhmut, and he rubbed that in the face of the defense ministry, obviously claiming that he was better than the defense minister, and now we see that full-on feud out in the open.
Fred Pleiken with some important context. Fred, thank you. Let's go now to the White House. CNN White House reporter Jasmine Wright. The White House says the president has been briefed and is monitoring the developments in Russia. Tell us more.
Yeah, Victor, look, as we heard from Nick and Fred there, this is a fast-moving situation that has immense geopolitical implications. And so the White House says that they are monitoring this very closely, taking this very seriously. Now, I have to say, Victor, that as of last night, the White House and the National Security Council have been very particular in what type of information, what type of statements that they're putting out, knowing just how fast moving this situation is, just how things could change in an instant. So they've been careful in this situation. But last night, we know that President Biden was briefed on the situation unfolding in Russia. Of course, we asked this morning whether or not President Biden will be briefed again on what happened overnight here in the U.S., as well as we know that the National Security Council, they put out a statement yesterday. I want to read it for you. They said that we are monitoring the situation and will be consulting with allies and partners on these developments. You can see that on the screen there. Obviously, this holds a lot of implications for President Biden, but also for the unity that he has worked very hard over the last few months and years to hold, to really hold Russia's feet to the fire in support of Ukraine. As early as January, though, we know that they were talking about this from the podium, that the U.S. officials had identified some type of internal struggle happening between the Wagner Group and Russia, and therefore they were monitoring any intelligence from that point, at least, very closely. Just a real window into the fact that they are taking this issue very, very seriously. Now the question becomes what happens today. We know that President Duda of Poland tweeted a few hours ago that he would be talking to his allies. That would include perchance President Biden. So we've asked, of course, what President Biden's efforts of this are going to be today. Will he talk to allies, and how will he really stay tuned on this very quickly developing situation? Victor?
All right, Jasmine Wright, thank you very much. Let's talk more about this with CNN military analyst, retired Air Force Colonel Cedric Leighton. Colonel, thank you so much for joining us this morning. I mean, it really is stunning and extraordinary to see this leader of the Wagner Group, which was instrumental in the war in Ukraine, challenging Putin's military leadership, vocally calling it out, saying things like that it's incompetent. And now Yevgeny Prigozhin is refusing to surrender. How would you describe what's happening there on the ground in Russia?
Well, it's a confused mess, Amara, and I think one of the key things to think about here is that, the historical precedent, as Nick mentioned earlier, is really not there in modern Russia. You have to go back several centuries before you see something like this. It is kind of like Napoleon coming back from Elba and moving up and retaking control of France, except the one big difference, of course, with that analogy is that Prigozhin has never held power, absolute power in Russia. He's never been the president or the head of state of the country. So it's clearly a power play. At the very least, what Prigozhin wants to do is give his force, the Wagner Group, a major piece of recognition that he feels they're not having. But I think he's gone beyond that. He's kind of crossed that bridge of no return. He's made it very clear that what he really wants is absolute power over Russia. And in fact, it seems as if, although he's not saying it, it seems as if he really wants to control the entire country, in other words, depose Putin.
So you would describe this as an attempt, a coup attempt by Prigozhin?
I think so. I think at this point you have to say it is a coup attempt. The Russians themselves, Amara, are describing this as a coup attempt. It's where you look at the language of all these people and how they're describing this, it seems that the Russian state, in other words, Putin's side, they are really concerned about this. They are concerned that Prigozhin is going to attract a large number of recruits to his side. Whether or not that's successful, of course, remains to be seen. But I think the danger is there, and the Russian side, in other words, Putin's side, really feel the pressure to make sure that that doesn't happen.
Okay, then strategically, what needs to happen next from Putin's perspective, especially when you see the optics of Prigozhin saying and declaring that his 25,000 troops, as he says, are crossing over from Ukraine into Russia, demanding to meet with the military leadership, although he does deny that this is an attempt to carry out a military coup. But what do you see happening next?
So I think what you'll see, if Putin can maintain control of his forces, you will see some kind of battles between the Wagner Group and the Russian military. Now, what's interesting is when you look at what's happened on social media and you see, some of the unconfirmed reports from the area, it appears as if, at least around the Rostov region in this, southeast, basically, of Ukraine, that there has been no real resistance to the Wagner Group. They have not stopped the armed personnel carriers. They've not stopped the movement of Wagner Group mercenaries. And those mercenaries have apparently taken control of at least one of the major buildings that the Ministry of Defense occupies in Rostov. So they're going to have to dislodge them from that. The Putin side is going to have to dislodge the Wagner Group from that building and possibly other buildings. And if the same thing is happening in Voronezh, which is a lot closer to Moscow, then you're going to see a big effort to try to control this. So that, I think what we can see is some pitched battles between the two sides, potentially, or the other side of this is that, they will kind of fraternize with each other, commingle the forces, and something will be worked out in the back room, and Putin will remain in control, or he will lose control. Those are basically the two branches that could happen here, and that's I think what we're looking at the moment.
Wow. So how quickly do you see this descending into some kind of urban warfare and also a full-fledged civil war, especially when Prigozhin says that he has taken control of the post in southern Russia, which is a 10-15 hour drive from Moscow, Rostov-on-Don, and also which military has the advantage, especially when we talk about numbers. We know that Putin has a much larger military than this private military group, Wagner, but we know, that the Wagner group has been much more effective in its war against Ukraine.
Yeah, I think this is really a battle of effectiveness in this case, right? So what you're looking at is, which force can bring the most power to bear the most quickly. I do think it is possible that we will see, some kind of conflict, some kind of open warfare, at least in a localized sense. If Prigozhin is stopped, then you won't see a full-fledged civil war. However, if this continues to metastasize from Putin's point of view, then it's going to be much more dangerous for Putin. And that's going to be, I think, the critical juncture that we're going to be at here pretty soon.
But is Putin's immediate objective right now is it to capture Prigozhin and kill him?
I think at the very least capture. The way he spoke, though, it indicates that he sees this as treason. And of course, the punishment in Russia for treason is ultimately potentially death.
Colonel Cedric Layton, appreciate it. Thank you.
And of course, we will follow all that's happening in Russia with all the angles, bring you all the analysis throughout the morning. But there is other news that we're following for you, including the multiple investigations into what caused the Ocean Gate submersible to implode underwater. All 5 on board were killed. Where the effort to find and recover the debris stands this morning. Plus, we're following new developments in the special counsel investigation into former President Trump's handling of classified documents. The dozens of people Trump is now barred from talking to about the case and when we might see him back in court.
Lactate is 100% real milk, just without the lactose. Delicious, too. Just ask my old friend Kevin.
Nothing like enjoying a cold one while watching the game. Who's winning?
No idea. Real milk, real delicious. And don't forget to try some delicious, creamy Lactate ice cream. What's that, Mabel?
Wow. I'm not in charge of naming the subs.
This morning, we're following developing news out of Russia, where in a televised address earlier, Russian President Vladimir Putin vowed to punish anyone involved in treason or armed rebellion.
Now, the leader of the Wagner mercenary group, Yevgeny Prigozhin, a longtime ally of the Kremlin, claimed his troops had taken control of the military facilities in the Russian cities of Voronezh and Rostov-on-Don. Now, Putin has called this an insurrection.
And security has ramped up in Moscow with military trucks spotted on the streets and anti-terrorism measures being carried out in the city. The Wagner chief has threatened to move onto the Russian capital if top military leaders do not come to meet with him. The U.S. Coast Guard will lead an investigation into exactly what went wrong, causing that Titanic-bound submersible to implode and kill all 5 people on board. Today, investigators will continue scouring the ocean floor for answers.
They're mapping out the debris field. It's located about 1,600 feet from the Titanic's wreckage. That should help piece together a timeline of the incident. CNN's Jason Carroll explains.
These are some of the first images of the remotely operated vehicles which found portions of the Titan's hull and continued on a new mission to search and map the debris site. The ROVs will continue searching for more evidence of the accident. The submersible lost contact with the ship on the surface 1 hour and 45 minutes into its descent on Sunday.
The other thing that I heard was that PH had contacted the surfer ship and said there was a problem, we're dropping weights and surfacing immediately. Now, I can't verify that, but that to me meant something really happened very quickly.
OceanGate did not comment when asked about what Gallo had heard. Deep-sea experts questioned the lack of testing of the vessel and the integrity of materials used to make the hull. A CNN review shows that while OceanGate publicly touted a commitment to safety measures, it rejected industry standards that would have imposed greater scrutiny on its operations and vessels.
Specially trained crew members safely diving to the Titanic wreckage site.
In this promotional video published last year, the company touted an unforgettable but safe voyage. That video also features Paul-Henri Nargiole, one of the passengers on board Titan.
The sub, for me, it's very well done because it's simple. Generally, they have a lot of equipment and a lot of switch. And on this one, you don't have because you work with a screen and with a keyboard, and it's very easy to do that.
CNN also learned 2 former OceanGate employees separately voiced safety concerns about the design of the Titan. OceanGate has not responded to CNN about those claims. And in 2019, Lloyd's Register, a marine certification company, declined a request from OceanGate to certify the Titan. The company has not said why. OceanGate's co-founder, who left the company in 2013, cautioned against rushing to judgment.
There are teams on site that are still going to be collecting data for the next few days, weeks, maybe months, and it's going to be a long time before we know exactly what happened down there.
Both the NTSB and the Canadian Transportation Safety Board say they have launched investigations into what happened. Also, the U.S. Coast Guard has declared the loss of the Titan to be a major marine casualty. Jason Carroll, CNN, Boston.
Jason, thank you. And you can catch a special hour on the underwater tragedy, the recovery effort, the dangers of deep sea exploration. The whole story with Anderson Cooper. That's where it is tomorrow night at 8 on CNN. Well, now to a CNN exclusive as we're learning new details out of Special Counsel Jack Smith's probe into Donald Trump's efforts to overturn the 2020 election. The former president has long been accused of planning to install fake electors in a number of swing states.
And what's emerging now is at least 2 of those fake electors have testified in recent weeks in return for limited immunity from federal prosecutors. Caitlin Polance has the latest now on the investigation and more from Washington.
The special counsel's office investigating Donald Trump has been busy this past week in both of their investigations. So the Mar-a-Lago case, where Donald Trump is charged with 37 counts, that is a case where the Justice Department came into court on Friday night and filed a couple different things. First, they asked to move the trial date or set the trial date for December for Donald Trump and his co-defendant Walt Nauta. Right now, Donald Trump has said he is not guilty, so he is planning to go to trial. Walt Nauta is expected to show up in court on Tuesday of the next week. and also enter a pleading of not guilty at this time and get headed to trial. There was a date on the calendar that was much sooner than December, but the Justice Department is saying in a court filing on Friday night that there's actually a lot of business that has to be taken care of in this case for both sides to prepare, especially around the use of classified documents, how that is going to function in the trial. And so they're asking for a December court date. The Donald Trump legal team does indicate that they might be opposing that, but we're going to have to see exactly what happens in the coming days with that and what the judge ultimately says about a trial date. In addition to that, Trump's team and Walt Nauda's team do have a list of people, witnesses in this case that both of those defendants are not allowed to be speaking with about the facts of the Mar-a-Lago documents case. And Donald Trump's team, according to one of the court filings from the Justice Department on Friday night, that list is 84 people long. So 84 people Donald Trump would not be able to talk about Mar-a-Lago and classified documents with as he awaits trial, because he could be punished, put in jail even, or held in contempt if he doesn't follow the court's orders there. So that's what's happening in the Mar-a-Lago investigation. In the special counsel's investigation around the 2020 election, there has been a lot of grand jury activity that leads several of our sources to believe that this case is nearing a final stage and a charging decision could be near. That includes 2 electors, so fake electors for Donald Trump from the state of Nevada in 2020. They had gone into the grand jury several days ago, and when they went to the grand jury, they previously had been unwilling to share with investigators what they knew, wanted to assert the Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination, and prosecutors said no, they needed their testimony and they needed it now, and they received some level of immunity so that they would have to testify in the grand jury. And they spoke about how at least a lawyer from the Trump campaign and others were coordinating the efforts of the fake electors. There are other grand jury witnesses going in recent days as well, and some more expected in the coming days. And so the special counsel's office has both of these things, the Mar-a-Lago case moving towards trial at quite a quick clip, and the special counsel investigation around January 6th, Donald Trump, and the 2020 election, that has really heated up as well. Caitlin Polance, CNN, Washington.
All right, still ahead. An internal conflict in Russia amid the war in Ukraine. Vladimir Putin and the leader of the Wagner mercenary group go head to head. We're going to discuss the diplomatic dynamics at play next.
At FlexSealProducts.com.
Top stories for you now. Russian President Vladimir Putin is accusing the leader of the Wagner mercenary group, Yevgeny Prigozhin, of urging an armed rebellion. And Prigozhin claimed his troops took control of military facilities in 2 Russian cities.
But Prigozhin denies his acts are a coup attempt, saying instead the takeovers are a march of justice that will not interfere with Russia's armed forces in any way. CNN international diplomatic editor Nick Robertson is in London. He's been following these developments very closely. Good morning to you, Nick. So how does this impact the way Russians view this war?
What's really interesting about the way that Putin has handled the situation so far, not just that it's taken a long time to deal with the challenges of Prigozhin, who was such a close ally of Putin, that has led it to grow to this stage that there was essentially armed rebellion on the street. But it's that Putin is taking this purely as a security issue, that he is using anti-terror legislation to allow the army to crack down on Prigozhin and his supporters. That's super clear. But what Putin hasn't done here at all, not one iota, is address what Prigozhin has been saying over the past months, that the war in Ukraine is being fought badly, that there are unnecessary deaths, that there are shortages of ammunition, that the people to blame are the defense minister, Sergei Shoigu, Valery Gerasimov, the army chief of staff. So Putin is not dealing with that core question, and that's a question that is actually quite writ large in Russian society. People do ask that, particularly the families who've lost loved ones in the fight. That number could be from 100,000 perhaps to 200,000. So Putin even after he deals with this security situation, is going to have to deal with that question. And his delays in dealing with it so far make him look weak. How he frames the war going forward after all this criticism, can he really completely ignore it? This is going to be a question that will affect how much longer he can stay in power. He has to stay in the war in Ukraine to keep a narrative that victory can be had, that success can be had, and that is key, absolutely key to him, Putin, remaining in power. So this is a core issue. This issue of is it a worthwhile war? And he's not answering it.
Now to the Ukrainian half of this. What do you think the Western allies of Ukraine, what they're seeing, how they approach this?
They're looking at it very closely. We've heard from a number of different countries today, the Germans, the French, the Czechs, the Poles, the British, NATO collectively, all saying that they're watching closely. The British are saying they're talking to the European allies, to their G7 partners. There's a lot of scrutiny because what happens next on the ground in Russia is vitally important. How much longer can Putin hold on to power? Is he about to lose power? I think that's a really big and open question at this point in the day. 24 hours time, we should have a better answer on that. But if not Putin, then who? And if it's somebody who's, is it going to be the military commanders? Is it going to be perhaps Ramzan Kadyrov, the Chechen leader? How will they prosecute the fight in Ukraine, or will they change tack on it? And this is what, of course, is going to have allies concerned. If not Putin, then how is the fight in Ukraine going to go? Is it going to escalate, or will it be called to a halt?
Nick Robertson, thank you. Still to come, today marks 1 year since one of the biggest rulings of Supreme Court history, the overturning of Roe versus Wade. Well, now some politicians are looking to take the fight against abortion further. Today marks 1 year since the historic Supreme Court decision to overturn the federal right to abortion under Roe v. Wade. Now, since then, lawmakers in 20 states have abortion bans in some form or on the books, with 14 states banning abortion altogether. Other states have moved to expand access to abortion, and just this week, governors in New York and Arizona signed bills to protect doctors who provide abortion care to people coming in from out of state. Now, abortion rights are already a hot-button issue for candidates on the campaign trail. Watch.
Court got Roe right 50 years ago, and I believe Congress should restore the protections of Roe v. Wade once and for all.
Every Republican candidate for president should support a ban on abortion before 15 weeks as a minimum nationwide standard.
CNN political commentator and Spectrum News political anchor Errol Lewis joins us now. Errol, good morning to you. And I want to start right there where the former vice president ended, calling for this commitment to a 15-week ban. At the top of the list, as it relates to the polls, Donald Trump doesn't think it's a good idea to talk about abortion. We saw how hedgy he was during the town hall on CNN. Is he right here that this really isn't a winning issue, although he claims kind of cleanly, I ended Roe?
Good morning, Victor. Look, Mike Pence is trying to win a Republican nomination, and so he is talking directly to the anti-abortion, very conservative base of the party that he thinks is going to carry him to victory. That may or may not happen. Donald Trump, although we know he's not really one for basing his actions on polling data, actually is tracking with the polling data. He knows that it is a loser for him. In fact, he lost an election, so he knows what it feels like when the country is going in a different direction. All of the polling, Victor, suggests that in the last year, a lot of Americans, including Republicans, have decided that these extreme bans where doctors are criminalized, where mothers are put into really difficult positions where they have to decide whether or not to continue with a pregnancy or continue with, say, cancer treatment. People are not ready for that. People don't want that. The polls show that it motivates Democrats, it pulls over independents, and it pulls over some Republicans. It is a very, very difficult position that people like Mike Pence are going to talk their party into.
Yeah. Does it hurt the former president when he continuously says, I ended Roe, I'm the one who ended Roe? Of course, it was a decision by the Supreme Court, and he put 3 justices on the court. But do you think that hurts him moving forward?
Well, you know, it's interesting. We'll have to see, obviously. But when he says that, he's talking, again, to the Republican base. And there are a lot of other issues that come with the Supreme Court. So it may alienate some people. It will energize the Democratic base, but he wasn't going to get those people anyway. What it does do, though, is establish that he's going to play court politics. And in a lot of other realms, whether it's school prayer or housing or other issues, he may get some of those folks back. So when Donald Trump says, I ended Roe, he's also saying, I will play court politics. And that actually may work out for him in a way that some of the other ways that people like Mike Pence talk about it don't necessarily work out so well.
Let's stay at this event where we saw former Vice President Pence. This is the Faith and Freedom Coalition event. The former New Jersey governor and candidate for the nomination, Chris Christie, was booed at this event. Let's watch.
I'm running because he's let us down. He has let us down because he's unwilling. He's unwilling to take responsibility for any of the mistakes that were made, any of the faults that he has, and any of the things that he's done. And that is not leadership, everybody. That is a failure of leadership. And you can boo all you want.
Vintage Christie. I mean, covering the region as you do, you know he's done that for quite a while. Listen, this is a pro-Trump event. He probably expected some boos or some pushback, but does this in some way help him? If he is trying to run in the anti-Trump lane, those folks who are now in polls say they'll never vote for him, look at him and see he is someone who will take it to Donald Trump, to his people, in a way that DeSantis and Haley and Scott and the others will not.
Yeah, well, that certainly is what he's doing. I don't know if I would call it a path to victory. I would call it sort of a minority position within the Republican Party that Chris Christie, for reasons best known to himself, feels like he has to enunciate. I mean, the reality is there's almost no path to victory there. The polling shows he is by far, Victor, the most unpopular of the Republican candidates. What I think is interesting about it is that there continues to be this trickle of new candidates into the race, and none of them, of these new entrants, seem to be overly afraid of Donald Trump. I mean, the folks who first jumped in, the Mike Pences and so forth, the Ron DeSantises, they seem to think they can take Trump's base away from him. It's unclear whether or how that would ever happen, and they're having a very hard time getting any traction in that direction. Chris Christie goes in an entirely different direction, is very unpopular with the base, which is, after all, still committed to Donald Trump. But he feels like he has to say something. He hasn't drawn any counterattacks, really, from Donald Trump. And this is, you know, sort of the evolving field. More and more people jumping in. Former mayor of Miami jumping in. Will Hurd, a former congressman jumping in. Lots of people, and they don't fear Donald Trump at this point.
Yeah, 12 candidates in the race now. Errol Lewis, thanks so much.
Coming up, one of baseball's biggest rivals heads across the pond as the Cubs and Cardinals are set to face off this weekend in London. We'll have a preview of the international showdown next.
1-3700.
There is no hotter team in Major League Baseball right now, I'm told, than the Cincinnati Reds. They extended their winning streak on Friday night to 12 games thanks to their rookie phenom, Andy Scholes.
Joining us now. So what a winning streak by the Reds.
Oh, man, what a time for baseball in Cincinnati there, guys. And this kind of came out of nowhere. You know, the Reds, they lost 100 games last year. They were 6 games under 500 before this streak started, but now they're in first place in the NL Central. And the fans there just couldn't be more excited. And a big reason for the recent success is the play of rookie Elly De La Cruz, the 21-year-old third baseman, one of the top prospects in baseball when he got called up earlier this month, and he has just been tearing it up. Last night in the 6th inning, Elly completing the cycle with this triple right here. He's the youngest player to hit for the cycle in baseball in 51 years. Now, the Reds were down 5-0 to the Braves in this game, but Joey Votto helping the comeback. He hit 2 home runs in front of a sellout crowd of more than 43,000. Cincinnati winning this one 11-10 for their 12th win in a row. It's their longest winning streak since 1957. right, the Cubs and Cardinals, meanwhile, they're going to renew their rivalry this weekend, not in Chicago or St. Louis, but in London. This will be the first time since 2019 that Major League Baseball has played a game in Europe. They're going to face off in a 2-game series at London Stadium, where the Premier League's West Ham United usually play. Cubs and Cardinals were supposed to make this trip back in 2020, but those games were canceled due to the pandemic. All right, Wemby Mania. Meanwhile, running wild now in San Antonio. Victor Wembanyama arriving in the Lone Star State yesterday with some fans chanting WemVP, 7'4", first overall pick. He's set to be introduced by the team later today. All right, finally, Happy Gilmore has officially committed to play college golf at Ball State University. And no, this is not a sequel to the 1996 Adam Sandler movie. This one is a 17-year-old high schooler from Indiana named Landon Gilmore, but he goes by the nickname Happy, and he's a good golfer, qualifying for the U.S. Junior Amateur just yesterday. And Sandler actually congratulated Gilmore in a Twitter post saying, "Go get him, Happy. I'm pulling for you."
How uncanny.
And I guess if your last name is Gilmore and you play golf,
Exactly.
you've got to go ahead and nickname Happy. Right?
And if your nickname is Happy, can you do anything else? I mean, you have to just follow this out.
Yeah, it's like if your last name was Burgundy, I'd call you Ron.
That's true.
On that.
Thanks, Andy Schultz.
All right.
Good to see you.
Next hour, CNN This Morning starts after a quick break.